Hey guys, welcome to my very first devlog. So I've made a prototype of a game. Now obviously you can tell it's a prototype because I don't have any fancy 3D models or particle effects or post-processing or anything like that. But the basic 3D models which are provided in your game engines are good enough if you want to prototype your project before actually importing in or bringing in your 3D models and all the fancy stuff. Anyway, so currently the objective of the game, which may or may not change as I continue adding some more features, is this. I'll maximize on play and let's enter play mode. So you can see two buttons here, jump and shoot. These are just basic buttons which can easily be replaced. So you need to shoot and kill the red guys and you need to jump over the yellow things. And they'll keep spawning. And it looks like it's random. Yes, it is. The spawning of these objects is completely random. What happens if I crash into one? Let's see. And the player dies and it's game over. Okay, this is what I have so far. And let's take a look at the code. This is my player controller class for controlling the player, of course. As you can probably tell by the summary, this class controls all the aspects of the player. Okay, so I've got some variables here. Let me just explain very quickly what I have written. So I have a private float over here called jump force, and this variable controls the amount of force exerted whenever the jump button is pressed. I have also put in tooltips and summaries wherever possible so that it's easier for you guys and for myself to understand in the future. One very important aspect of programming, be it game programming or whatever, always put comments, because you won't always remember what you're writing. Okay? You can dash out a project now, but then if you want to return to it after a couple of months or maybe even a year or two, you're not going to remember exactly what is doing what. So it's always a good idea to add comments and, in my case, summaries if you're using Visual Studio, right? And tooltip is also, these are also very handy. Let me quickly show you what tooltips do. So this is a private float jump force, and because I've put the serialized field attribute in front of it, this will actually be visible in the editor. Okay, and just remember this. Remember this line, this variable controls the amount of force exerted whenever the jump button is pressed. Let's go back to Unity. I'm going to click on my player and I'm going to hover my cursor over the jump force variable. And voila, this variable controls the amount of force exerted whenever the jump button is pressed. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Similarly, I have a game object bullet prefab to store the bullet that we shoot, to store the gun, and rigid body, that's the physics. Okay, I have another variable here, is player grounded. That's just to make sure that the players don't, spam the jump button. We don't want our main character to, keep on flying. So that's why this variable exists, to make sure that you can only press the jump button once and once only. Alright, moving ahead. Public static bool is player dead. Now this is what is called a property. I'm assuming you already know what public means. And static means obviously it's a keyword, but whenever your variables, properties, and methods are static, you don't need to create an object of the class to access them. Okay, you can directly reference the class name followed by the dot operator and then the name of the property or the method or the variable. In my case, it's a property. Now what this does is, let's take a look at this. It's called public static bool is player dead. That's to make sure, okay, this controls the game conditions which rely on the player controller being destroyed. That means there are certain aspects of the game which I want to happen when the player is dead. And this is what we use to check that. But those aspects are not necessarily stored in this class. They're stored in other classes. So what I did was, by doing this and then using get and private set, what this allows you to do is, if you have a public property and you just type get, that means every other class inside your project will be able to get this property. That means it will be able to read it. You can check for it in other classes. But when you go ahead and type private set, that means it can only be set privately. And private, as we already know, means that you can only modify the variable or the method in that class, right? So when you say private set, that means this property can only be set privately in this class, obviously, but a normal get means that you can get it from any other class. So quick example, I have a, is this it? No, this is not the one. Let me see where I'm using that. In move left. Aha, there we go. So if not player controller dot is player dead, see, very easy. It allows me to get the property without any other word. And as you can notice, I haven't created an instance of this class. That means I haven't created an object of player controller in my move left class. Why is that? Because I used the static keyword. Alright, now that was a brief about properties. Let's move on. As you can see the code here, now I know this probably isn't the best way of doing things. There are some better ways, I'm sure of it. But mine is a very simple project so far. So I don't think I require any advanced techniques. But yeah, if you think you can make my code a little more efficient, let's hang out in the comments. You're more than welcome to share your thoughts. Pretty simple stuff. I don't think there's any need of explanation of what's going on here. Move left. This actually moves everything on the left side. The classes for moving elements such as the enemy, ground, and the background to keep moving left. Bullet controller. This is for the bullet. Pretty simple stuff. You can go through the code. Let me know if you don't understand anything, although there isn't anything complicated going on here, the same thing. Spawn manager. Now this is a little interesting. Here's when I'm using an array of the prefabs to be spawned. In this array, I have stored the two prefabs that I want, enemy and the fire. Now, this is how you get things to randomly instantiate. First of all, this is where we're controlling that. So first of all, let's have an integer and give it any name you want, but I'm calling it prefab index, and set that to random.range and in the brackets pass in 0, the name of the array that you've created, that is prefabs dot length. What this does is it's going to generate a random number in between 0 and the length of your array, right? Now yes, I only have 2 elements in my array right now, so I could have gone ahead and put 2 over here, but if I were to bring in more items inside my array, maybe I have some more prefabs, maybe different types of enemies, I would have to come back and manually keep changing it again and again every time I modified my array. But if you do it like this, right? Prefabs.length. That means it will automatically take the length of your array instantly. And then what it's doing is it's generating a random number in between this. And as you know, the index of an array starts from 0. And that, because this is an integer variable, we can pass it as an index, or we can pass the output of this line as an index to the array. And then simply using this instantiate method, we instantiate the prefab based on the index which has been generated by this random.range, and then the allocated transform.position which you set when you generate the prefab. Same goes for rotation. The rotation, if you want any, that you set or may not set when you generate the prefab. And now, as to the calling of this particular method, spawn prefabs, right? It's only going to be called if the player is not dead, which is what this line controls. If the player is dead, you stop spawning, which is ideal because we don't want the game to go on even after the player has died, right? Okay. Now, as I was saying, the calling of this method called spawn prefabs, I am using this thing called invoke repeating. Let's see what the tooltip tells us. Invokes the method name in time seconds, then repeatedly every repeat rate seconds. So what it does is you need 3 arguments for this method to work properly. First is the method name, which you pass it as a string. So this is what I've done: spawn prefabs, spawn prefabs. Make sure you don't make any spelling mistakes, otherwise it's not going to work. What else do we need? We need float time. So the second variable dictates when you want this repeating to be called, this repetition to be called. And the third variable dictates how often you want the repetition to occur, the frequency of your repetition. And this invoke repeating, what it means is, okay, let me explain it. So my prefab spawn delay is 5 seconds, and my prefab random repeat is a random number between 2 and 4 seconds, right? So what this line of code is doing essentially is it's going to start calling this method called spawn prefabs. When the game starts, it's going to wait for 5 seconds, right, before starting the calling, and after that it's going to repeat this in a random number between 2 and 4 seconds. That's what it does. Pretty simple, pretty awesome. Okay, and here's the repeat ground. Pretty much straightforward again. Now I have left out some things that I haven't yet implemented, of course. One is something to keep track of the score, something to keep track of the high score, and something to keep track of the menus. I don't have a pause menu yet, I don't have a main menu yet, I don't have a death menu yet. So that's what I'm going to be primarily working on before importing in the models and animations, right? So in our next video, I will be back with my pause menu and main menu and death menu working. Alright, I hope you guys had a good time looking at my devlog. This was my very first one, so let me know how you liked it. Let me know if there are some improvements that can be made. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, you know the usual. And this is me signing off. Thank you for watching very much. Have a good day.